I'm Rhonda, Director of Groundwork Arts. Today we're going to make watercolor drawings that are like magical science experiments. Crazy things happen when you let go and let water do the work. Watercolors will bloom, bleed, blend, and create unusual and beautiful images. And add black ink to it, and it's even cooler. This project is inspired by Yucca Valley artist Heather Sprague. Heather is a photographer who loves to paint. She pushes the boundaries of watercolor by letting the materials tell her what to do and gets lost in the process of playing. For her, the process connects her mind with her heart and her body and is very calming and meditational. Here's what you'll need: 2 jars of water, watercolor paint, a paint palette, watercolor paper, a paintbrush, water dropper, straw, paper towel, and a black pen. We need to prepare 4 things really quickly before we begin. First is choosing paper. We need a heavyweight paper, not a thin copy paper. 140 pound, which means it's thick. And then we need to choose 2 colors, only 2 colors. We're gonna use a limited color palette so that we can really focus on how the water works with the pigment. And 2 jars of water, one for dirty water to clean your brush and the other clean water. And your friend is a paper towel so you can blot your brush. The first thing we're going to do is paint with water, only water. You can take a dropper and drip, drop. You can connect the dots. You could use a paintbrush and dab. You can make a shape and a swirl, add more dots. And we're going to use the entire sheet of paper, but we're not going to cover the paper with water. We're going to look at the negative space, which is the non-shiny parts, and the positive space, the shiny parts. Pay really close attention to the amount of water. Is there a dome or a puddle or a river? Is there a sheen or is it dry? Because that's going to affect how your paint responds. Once we've done that, we can add our first color. And we're going to load up our brush with watercolor, and we're going to dab into the water. We're not going to paint with the brush. We're just using it as a tool to add color. Does the amount of water we use affect the paint? And what happens when we add just a small amount of paint, or when we add a lot of paint? And how does the paint interact with the water? Next, we're going to look at what happens with movement. So what happens if we take a straw and we blow the paint? Or when we tilt the page? Or we can shake it. The cool thing is that paint will follow the path of water. It generally won't go outside of the water wall. Next, we'll add the second color and see what happens. And do the paints react differently to the water? And how do 2 different paints interact with each other? Let me show you what happens with one kind of bleed. So we have the water on the paper, and then I just do paint down the middle, and you can watch the paint start to bleed either side, and you can add more if you want. And the paint will push out. You can also do a color to color bleed by putting a color right next to the other and seeing what happens. And you can see that the red is pushing into the blue. To create a bloom, you can add a watery paint to a surface that's starting to dry. You can continue to experiment by adding more water and paint. can also remove paint by dipping in the water and going over a dry area and then using a paper towel to pull it up. When it's dry, you can begin to outline the negative shapes, or you can outline the outside of shapes that you see. Or you can outline the edge and also the color shifts. Once you've finished outlining, you can see things really clearly, at least I can. This looks like a baby with a big mouth and a brain. And I see a coyote with a tail and maybe a dinosaur or some kind of salamander. You could also leave some of it undone, but it's super fun to see how it's outlined. These experimental watercolor drawings are truly magical. They encourage us to slow down, to play and get lost in a process, and to exercise patience. In order for them to work, we have to pause and let the materials do the work. And they're also a big stress reliever. When I'm done with an abstract watercolor, I feel very relaxed. Why not be a watercolor scientist today? Grab a piece of paper, some water, a little bit of paint, a big imagination, and conduct an art experiment.